So I recently started working full time, and it's very different from your life as a student. So for the students in the room, enjoy your student life. But I had the unique opportunity prior to starting working full time to travel, and not just to vacation or stay in a fancy hotel, but to travel. Backpack, limited itinerary, if any at all, across the world in various different countries, cities I'd never heard of, sometimes solo, sometimes with friends. And upon my return to Montreal, I had to reflect on my travels, and one thing I remembered or realized was that I learned just as much in my travels, if not more, than I did in my studies. Wildly different things, completely different things, but just as much, if not more. So much so that when people ask me about my travels, or I volunteer the information because I think it's cool, I explain my travels as an extension of my education, an additional semester. While I was going on my trip, another thing happened. AI came into the mainstreams. Upon my return, and now today, it's ubiquitous. It's in probably most of your pockets. People use ChatGPT and Claude to prompt for so many different things. Make their daily tasks easier, to learn, grocery lists, recipes, practically anything. Professionals use it in their work. We use legal AI on a daily basis. And students use it to study. I'm sure they use it for other things, but I think they also use it to study. And so, how can we make sure that in a world where students can ask AI almost anything, they still care about learning from us? And by us, I mean people, and by people, I mean their teachers. So I got to do some pretty cool things on my trips. I looked at some photos that I took on the board. So I was able to spend 12 days trekking to Everest Base Camp in the Himalayas in Nepal, hut to hut, dealing with altitude sickness, comparing myself and putting myself in perspective to these 8,000 meter peaks will make you feel very small, pros. Talk to locals, other travelers alike, see how the lifestyle is different, the culture, the history, language. It wasn't easy, but it was amazing. I also got to go to Morocco. There's some pretty cool photos there too. And on my trip there, I had to spend a few days in the Sahara Desert. Completely different environments, totally different way of life. History, culture, food. Had great conversations with locals and other travelers, difficult ones as well, understanding their worldview, what preoccupies their days. I do the same thing in East Java in Nunavut, to hike from volcanic crater to volcanic crater. And there too, a completely different part of the world with totally different ideas, ways of life, ways of being. And the things I learned on that trip, perspective, adaptability, empathy, emotional intelligence, these things were all very distinctly human. I was entrenched in a very human experience when I realized that things that AI couldn't teach me. And so if we acknowledge that students will be able to and are prompting AI for all sorts of content-related questions, then how can we make sure education still remains compelling, deeply human, and they don't disengage? And I say this because I have a younger brother who's in high school, and I was talking to him about this as I was preparing for this speech, and I said, how do you use it school related? He says, sometimes I go to class, and I might not understand what the teacher's talking about, and so I come home, and I ask AI these very same subjects. I'll ask it questions, I'll ask it to rephrase it, I'll ask it to go deeper, I'll ask it to vulgarize and make things simpler. Then I'll ask it to prepare me flashcards and Kahoots so I can practice and quiz myself for my exam. So, what are these things that AI can't teach? What did I learn on my travels and realize? Well, I'm going to call it our intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. Things that are distinctly human, and I'll categorize it by 5 things. Ethical judgment, emotional intelligence, empathy, critical thinking, and adaptability. Like, there's much more to this than just that, but for the sake of the presentation, we'll stick with these 5. And so, in my view, we're at a point where I think these need to be some things that are brought to the forefront of education. To be paired with the content that students learn in school, your classical subjects, but also to learn these very distinct human skills that AI cannot provide. Because these skills are going to become even more important, even more valuable going forward in a world that still remains very human, but has AI. In my personal experience, I was just sworn in as a lawyer about a month and a half ago. And in my first summer at my law firm, we didn't have AI. And now we do. And the doing of my work, just in that short period of time, has drastically changed. And these skills have become extremely important in the way I do things. Talking to people, understanding their background, making sure ideas come across clearly, asking critical thinking questions that AI can address, adapting, working in an environment with very different personalities and people. And I acknowledge the fact that students learn these things at school now. School is a very human place. You have your peers, you have your teachers, you make friends, you learn empathy, you gain emotional intelligence, you play on a sports team, you learn to adapt, you do learn critical thinking. But in my understanding, it's not a primary conscious goal for most educational institutions, some of them yes, to teach these things explicitly. And with the value of these skills going up, and in a world where we're going to need more thinkers rather than doers, because a lot of the doing is going to be done and is already being done, these are things that matter a lot. And in order for kids to come to school and know that they're going to learn things that they can't learn from AI, we need them to be excited about coming to school and learning. I think there is a real risk of students becoming disengaged and relying on AI if they do believe that they're going to come to school and learn things that we could come home with dropped. My talk is not a critique. I am not an expert. This is all anecdotal. I did not do any research, but it's an observation and an idea. And we need to recognize that teachers and the human element of education is irreplaceable. And we must ensure that education cultivates the human strengths that AI cannot replace.